Hi, it's Alison from Bag Ladybird Learn to Sew. Welcome. So I'm going to show you today how to sew corners. Now you might think, well, that's an easy thing to do. Sewing corners, I can do that. You just sew along one edge and then you sew it and you get a cross happening. Well, very often you then have to cut through your stitch lines because you need to reduce the bulk. So I'm going to show you the most effective way to sew your corners and to make sure that you're doing that accurately. And that means you're not going to cut off your seams and risk forming a hole in your garment. So here goes. Okay, so this is what I see a lot of people do for sewing corners. And this is the wrong way to do it. So just reverse, come forward, and we sew to the end like that. You might even do a little back tack reverse and then take the fabric out, then come and sew your second part of the corner, crossing over, so you're creating a cross. Got this kind of cross shape happening. So then when you come to trim down your seam allowances to reduce the bulk, so this would be if you're making a belt or anything that you'd have to bag out, then you have to cut your corner at 45 degree here, which means that both ends of these stitches are now unsecured. There's nothing holding them in place. And then you would turn through your corner and there'd be a potential for those stitches breaking or you getting a little hole forming in your corner, and that's not what we want to happen. So if I was to gently poke out this corner with my scissors, you can see the ends of the stitching are just starting to come away and we're starting to get a little bit of nastiness forming there. The correct way to do this is to mark your turning point. So whatever point your seam allowance is at. So for this we've been doing 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is 1.5 centimeters. So I'll just mark this here. Also mark it with a seam gauge. So we've got a marker with a friction pen. You could use a pin, you could use chalk, whatever your marking method. This little line on the base of the machine. So just here, this little line here. That is 1.5 centimeters, 5/8 of an inch away from your needle. So that is your seam allowance. So let's sew this corner and let's pivot at this corner. So we'll start off with a few stitches in reverse to secure, then come forwards and we're following the 5/8 line here. We're then coming, and this is where I will carefully hand wheel till I get the right position to meet that line. If you can see, the needle is right on my marker line here. The edge of the fabric here is lined up with the 5/8 line. So now you can lift your presser foot and pivot because your needle is down and holding that position, and then we can come down and sew the other side. So we've got a nice crisp corner happening here. So like I did before, you can trim down your seam allowance first of all, reducing that bulk, and then trim off at 45 degrees. Now we're going to turn this little corner inside out, so bagging this out, you can just finger press these seams to give it a little helping hand. You could do this with your iron. I'm going to turn that through. Now I'm going to gently just use the end of the scissors to poke this out. Now a pair of scissors is too sharp to poke out corner. You can easily do some damage with that. But there you can see the corner is nice and sharp without having any frayed threads or anything coming through. and you have a nice sharp corner. So you would also use this method if you were sewing the point of a collar. So let's imagine we have a collar here, and we're just going to mark the 5/8 line on this one again. I'm going to use the 5/8. In fact, let's pretend we've got a 1 centimetre seam allowance on this, just to show how you would do it with other seam allowances. So we're going to sew down this side and then come to meet this line here. So that's at 1 centimetre, and then we're going to pivot and turn. So 1 centimetre 3/8 seam guide here. Following along that, we're then coming to meet that line, and if you miss it slightly, you can just adjust your position so when you come down you're right on that line, and then you can pivot and come down. You'll see your edges are lined up with that nicely there, and you can get a nice sharp point on your collar. You can use this technique to get really accurate and symmetrical points on your collars. So same this one here, we're going to trim down our seam allowances to approximately half, and then we're going to trim off the point here. So you want to leave a little smidge, so about a stitch width there, and you can turn your collar point through. This seam gauge has got a point turner on it, so I'm going to just use that to gently poke out this corner, and you will see that you've got an accurate corner. So when you're sewing corners, don't make crosses. Put your needle down and pivot and get accurate seams. You should get a nice sharp poked out corner, and I'll show you other techniques for that on other videos. If you've enjoyed this, like the video and subscribe to the channel to see other great Learn to Sew content to help make you become a better dressmaker.